Hi, this is Rock. We're going to start with the sum function. So the sum function is a very basic formula. I'm going to go ahead and put in some random numbers here. All right. And how you put a function into Excel is you start by typing the equal sign, and then you can start typing the name of the function. So as I start to type, I put the letter S, and you see I have all these choices. All of these functions start with the letter S. The one that is highlighted in blue is the one that will be selected if you press Tab. Scan is not what we want first, we want sum. So I'm going to continue typing the word sum. I type a U and that brings up and highlights substitute. I can see sum is just two more down there. So at this point I can do a couple of things. I can keep typing the word sum, which is what I would typically do, but I could also, as an option, use the arrow key here to arrow down and then hit the tab key. If I did that and I hit tab right now, what it does is it completes the word that I'm typing and it gives me my open parentheses. So all functions in Excel include the name of the function and then the arguments inside parentheses. If you see here, it gives you a hint here. This hypertext area shows you what the rules are for the function that you're trying to insert here. The first thing you notice is if you hover over the word sum here, this gives you a hyperlink. If you click on that, it will bring up the help section for that function, whatever the function is. The first thing in the function after the function's name is the first argument. This argument is required. You can tell because it does not have square brackets around it. If it had square brackets, you'd know that that argument is optional. Arguments that you put into a function are separated by commas. And it doesn't matter whether or not you have spaces in addition to the commas. So the first argument that you want to put in here, you can type, let's say we want to add up G5 and G6, which are this 23 and 234. So arguments can be entered either as references or as the actual numbers themselves. I could type 23 and 234 here as my arguments, but what I'm going to do and what I typically do is use references as arguments. So for example, I can select this range, and this is typically how I use sum. I select a range and then I close the function with that closing parenthesis. Every formula in Excel needs to have an open and closed parenthesis that matches, right? What this did is it took this range, G5 through G12, and it summed it up, and the sum is 1790. Okay. Note that this will stay live, such that if I change this to 33 at the top, it'll go to 1800. So it continues to evaluate this anytime there's something that gets entered. If I change this to 55, it's keeping track of that, and it will also be updated when you make a change that affects this. So if I look at this and I do, since I've got a formula in here, if I click trace precedence here, it shows that this range flows to this cell. I'm going to click remove arrows here. What else about the sum function? It doesn't have to be right next to it. It can be anywhere. It can be on another sheet. I can come over here. I can hit Control X to cut that. I can bring it over here and hit Control V and it will paste it, and the sum is still connected. So if I come over here and I change this to 2000 and come back over here, you can see it's still tracking that. It does have the sheet reference in here saying that this range is on another sheet. It automatically did that when I did the cut and paste. Let's learn more about sum. I'm going to take this and paste it again here and paste it again here. And let's play around with this. If I say equals sum, I can choose this one and then put a comma and choose this one and put a comma and choose this one and put a closing parenthesis on that, and it will add those all up. Now, if I hit trace precedence, it's showing all three of these are leading into this. You can also have sums of sums. I'm going to remove the arrows here. If I say sum this, which is itself a sum, and this, and let's say I want to add 10 to that, I can just type the number 10. It will bring those all together. Now when I hit trace precedence, it shows where these come from. So within the sum function, you can have multiple types of things. You can have a reference, an actual number, a range, and you can also have another sum function. Notice that these parentheses have a different color. This outer set of parentheses are white, and the inner set is red. That's how Excel works. If you keep adding and nesting these sums inside here, it will keep changing the color of the parentheses so that you can keep track of which parentheses go together. And one thing to look at as you evaluate a formula, and I call this a formula since it's not a single function anymore, it's multiple functions. So anything that has that kind of complexity in there, I'm going to call it a formula. Sometimes I'll use the word formula interchangeably with function, but the true use of the word function is the specific named function and its basic arguments and its rules about it. But a longer formula like this that contains multiple functions in it, I would call a formula. As you use your arrow key here, see how when I arrow back and forth over this closing parenthesis for the third sum function that's in here, the first parenthesis of the third function lights up a little bit as I pass it. And now I'm going to pass the next to last parenthesis. And as I pass over it back and forth, it lights up a little bit. It emphasizes and becomes bold just for a second. So this is a very helpful way when you have complex formulas to kind of track where your open and closing parentheses are paired up. If you have too many parentheses, you will see at the end that you have more than one white parenthesis. Or if you're using a different color scheme, it will be black. But because my background is dark here, it's white. But the point here being that if you have more than one white parenthesis closing your formula, then you know you have too many and you need to go back and see why you don't have a matching pair for that one. Or if you end up ending without its being black or white, with its being a colored one, you know that that's not appropriately paired. Excel will keep track of your parenthesis count, and so you always want to end on that white or black one. So that's more about functions in general than the sum function specifically, but know that it applies to all functions, but this being the first function we're working on together, I wanted to point out the couple of truisms about functions, which are that you can combine them, that when you do, you need to keep track of their complexity and the opening and closing parentheses, and also that you can see whether an argument is required by seeing if it has the square brackets around it. If it has square brackets, the argument is not required. If it does not have square brackets, it is required. If I had a space in between here, that really doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. It still will come up with the same number despite the numbers of spaces here. Another thing I wanted to point out is that it's very handy to have this highlightable section of your function. It's an analysis of what you've got. So you can say, what is my number one argument? You can click on that and it will highlight it and tell you what that is. So you can see that it's this Q21. You can see that it's blue, and so it corresponds with this blue. When I highlight it, it evaluates it and tells me it's 11,229. I can go to my next number 2, and it highlights it and shows me it's 33, which that's easy enough because it's a single reference, but it even does it when you highlight for the range. It tells you what that range is made up of. And you can see here in this range, G5 through 12, it starts with 33 and it goes through 877. So as you hover over this, that's a very handy thing to check and make sure that it's referring to the right thing, is to see that highlight. It also works for this whole argument number 5, which is made up of 2 sum functions that are nested there. It gives you that 6287 that isn't anywhere on this sheet. It's just what this evaluates to, this 5th argument. Giving you a heads up about it's about to get really complex as we work on these functions and nest different functions inside each other to do all the amazing things that Excel can do. This is just the most basic function, and yet with it we can do so many things. That's the sum function. In the next video we'll talk about product and the product function. See you there.